Good evening, Ohio. It's James Ernest of the Grueling Truth Radio Network, where legends speak, and it's definitely the case tonight. We have Nikita Koloff, we have Neal Koloff, and we have Aleksandr Koloff of the Koloff Dynasty. Nikita, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey, let me just say, it is always a pleasure to be with you guys. Hey, Ohio.
Excellent. So what are you thinking, Neal?
I'm thinking this is a great time for us, and love the interview the last time. Thank you for having us back on, and we're very humbled and gracious to be back on with you. Thank you.
You guys were great. Definitely appreciate you also coming back, Aleksandr.
Yeah, same here. I'm glad to be back on. Looking forward to another one. Always enjoy the questions and everything, and hearing some of Nikita's stories, and ready to get at it.
Excellent. So, Nikita, what sports did you play growing up?
I was an avid football fan. My heart, it really in junior high school, I just kind of fell in love with professional football and combination of that and weightlifting and gravitated towards those two things. I, at an early age, picked up some bodybuilding magazines and just became infatuated by those guys, and can remember at a very young age saying to myself, one day, I'm gonna look like one of those guys. A little side note. I've tried baseball one year. I don't know. Do they have the Babe Ruth League in Ohio?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I tried baseball one year, and so I don't know if this is this might be a good thing. I don't know. So I tried baseball. I hated the curveball, like for real. Like I thought I was going to take my head off, and so I literally taught myself to switch hit. And so I would bat left-handed against every right-handed thrower, and right-handed against every left-handed thrower. And the cool thing is, I literally hit an equal amount of singles, doubles, triples. Never got the home run. Got to the fence, but never got it over. But hit an equal amount, so I guess I was a halfway decent athlete. And then position-wise, I played most of the positions on the team, but pitcher was the most fun. Because I did what, if there's any old baseball fans out there that might know the name Kent Colvey, I did the old submarine pitching. I thought, well, I'll get these guys back. They're going to scare me with the curveball. I'm going to scare them with the submarine pitch. And then was drafted for an all-star game and everything. But that was it. I'm like, I'm done. Give me a helmet. Give me some shoulder pads. Let me knock somebody's block off.
Exactly. Gotta love the sport of football. I understand that one was one that you pursued very thoroughly, and there were times where there were possibilities of either the NFL or USFL that came very close.
It did. I mean, I had a couple setbacks in college. For those who really don't know my story or want to know more of my story, your listeners will want to get a copy of Nikita, A Tale of the Ring and Redemption, my last book, really my life story. But interestingly, my freshman year as well as my senior year, I suffered fractured legs, not unlike Joe Theismann and more recently Alex Smith. And yet I was determined that those setbacks would not hold me back, and I like to say I actually used them as a reason to make a comeback. And so I was on that path of pursuing professional football when I got the phone call for professional wrestling.
Now, with your high school days, the way I understand it, the who's who of professional wrestling, were they there at the same time as you, or are they just also alums from the school?
Yeah, it's a crazy story because, in fact, I was just with Barry Darso last weekend doing an autograph signing in New York. Crusher Khrushchev, a.k.a. Axe, a.k.a. Repo Man, and a few other names. But, yeah, it's kind of great. In fact, on the same high school football team, 1 year anyway, Barry Darso, John Nord, Nikita Koloff, Rick Rude, and Kurt Henning all played on the same high school football team.
That is insane to think of. That, I mean, shoot, such great athletes all on the same team. Did you all win the state?
That's the next logical question. Everyone goes, wow, you must have had an incredible Unfortunately, coaching is as much a part of the success of a football team as its players. And we did not have the best coaching on the planet, and therefore we honestly were about a 500 ball club, maybe just a shade over 500. It would have been nice to win a state championship, but we just didn't have the coaching.
And then from there, you went on, you played in college, you played at two different programs. Of the two, which one was your favorite?
Gosh, I really enjoyed them both. A lot of memories come flooding back when you ask me about that, starting with, Irv Nerdahl and Phil Burke, my coach, two of my main coaches my freshman year, and Ross Forchie and John Richmond, two of my main coaches my senior year, and then some coaches sprinkled in between there. Dave Skrine was the head coach 1 year who actually wrote a book called Countdown to the Grey Cup. He was the head coach for one of the Canadian football, took his Canadian team to the Grey Cup.
Oh, wow.
The equivalent of the Super Bowl. He had an all-star coaching staff. We had Dave Skrine, Art Meadowcroft, who played with the Minnesota Vikings, George Adzik, who played for the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, for a small college football team to have a star-studded lineup like that was amazing. So I had some incredible coaches, and between the 4 years I played, I redshirted 1 year. Between the 4 years I played, we were like 37 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie. So I have to say, and all 4 of the teams were nationally ranked for their particular division. And my freshman year, my senior year, we were number 1 in the nation for our division of college football.
Unfortunately, recently, your former best man and former teammate passed away. Which team did you play on with him?
I recruited him right out of high school in 1978. Joe, you're referring to, of course, for your listeners, Road Warrior Animal. Joe Laurinaitis played at Irondale High School in New Brighton, Minnesota, and I was part of the recruiting squad and saw him highlighted in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, reached out. We were talking about this the other day. Those were the days when you could actually pick up a phone book and everybody's name, address, and phone number was right there at anybody's disposal. And now people freak out if they get your information, right?
Oh, definitely.
Right? But we had these big, thick phone books. And anyway, and so I reached out and gave him and his mom and dad, a personal tour of the campus on one of our big recruiting nights. And the rest is really history. And I'm sure you're probably going to lead into this, perhaps, but, this ties into Ohio as well. There's an Ohio story mixed in here, too.
Oh, you got me intrigued. I know his son played at Ohio, but what's the connection?
So I became an Ohio State Buckeye fan, even though I'm from Minnesota. And your listeners haven't figured out, I'm not from Russia. I'm from Minnesota, but and so I am a Golden Gopher fan, a Big Ten Golden Gopher fan. But for 4 years, I became an Ohio State Buckeye fan because of James Laurinaitis, playing linebacker for the Buckeyes, and James actually is back in the Columbus area living now.
I was going to say, I don't know, you probably thought of it too at the time. I always thought it was interesting that one of the linebackers that was on the team with him, there was a Hawk. It was like A.J. Hawk, I think was the fellow's name.
A.J. Hawk. Yep.
Yeah, so there was a hawk and there was an animal on the team at the same time. So I always thought that was kind of fun.
That's a little ironic, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, what are the odds? Going into your training for wrestling, Eddie Sharkey, what type of trainer was he?
It's a great question. I have no idea, because everyone assumes that because he trained all these other guys, he actually trained me. Now, so I answered the question, a two-part answer. One, he must have been a decent trainer for Rude and Darso and Henning and these other guys to have the career they had, while at the same time, those who know my story, or those who maybe don't, but the day I walked into Jim Crockett's office, I walked in with no amateur wrestling background, no professional training of any kind. I had met Eddie Sharkey, saw the guys a couple times at their camp, but as far as him training me, that's been a question I've had to answer and address over and over and over again. I'm not sure why that's out there. I guess maybe just the assumption, because I'm connected to all these other guys, that he trained me, but he did not.
Yeah, and everybody usually has somebody that trained it, but it sounds like you went in there with no experience and did phenomenal things without the precursors that most wrestlers need.
Well, it's a very unique story in that way. I don't know that there's another story like it. I mean, we've done a lot of research. I don't know that story would ever be repeated in today's world, because typically they're going to make you go through a year or 2 years of training camp or WWE school or something, or some sort of camp or training school. And so for me to literally just walk in off the street, and they put me on an interview set, put me the next night in the wrestling ring, and I have an 11-second win on television, and my debut was pretty unheard of at the time, and I doubt would ever be repeated again.
Speaking of that quick win, is it true what they say Crockett said about you, that if you tripped on the ropes, you would have been fired on the spot?
Well, it is true, and yeah, hired and fired, and all in 24 hours. I think he started because I had no experience, and he wanted us there early. We didn't get there early, not my fault, but they had to show me a couple basic things in the dressing room, how to lock up and tie up, and do this, and Ivan gets the credit for talking him into still giving me the chance. Ivan very early on, even though we had just met the day before, I guess maybe saw something in me that he believed in me enough that I could carry the ball without fumbling. And I have to say, in my mind, I'm like, well, how hard can that be? You don't trip on the ropes. But if you've never climbed in a professional wrestling ring, it's not as easy as you think it might be. But that certainly was my focus going to the ring that night. Don't trip on the ropes. Don't trip on the ropes.
Definitely. I know what you mean. I've been privileged enough to get in there once or twice, and yeah, I was going to say they're not the easiest things to get through, and it's just amazing how the professional athletes of professional wrestling make it look so flawless going in and out.
Well, and again, typically, of course, because of all their, all the training that they have done and years of experience. And here I walk in with zero experience and no training under my belt. And again, not even amateur wrestling, and yet, I was able to fortunately pull it off and have the success that I had.
So tell us about Ivan Koloff's impact on you inside and outside of the ring. Well,
I had this conversation today I've got a radio show called It's Time to Man Up, and a podcast as well. And I was recording some shows today, and we're talking a little bit about this. Really how Ivan was kind of more of an uncle to me, or as much of an uncle to me as an uncle, any uncle I ever had. The question was he really your uncle, or were you really related? I get that all the time, right? You know, your brother, your cousin, your uncle. But he took me under his wing, him and initially Don Kernodle, and really taught me the ropes, pun intended, taught me the ropes of wrestling and the mechanics and psychology of old school wrestling. And then fast forward, even beyond our wrestling careers, we maintained a friendship. In fact, we tag teamed on quite a number of ministry-related events, and leading up to his passing, where his wife had asked me to speak at a very small private graveside service for him. And so we maintained a wonderful relationship and friendship over all those years, and Ivan certainly gets a lot of the credit for my success.
You've been privileged to have some great partners, of course, like you said, Ivan and Don. You also, what was Smash's name? Was Crusher at one point, and Baron von Ruski. Tell us a little bit about those two guys.
The Baron, Baron is classic old school. And I was fortunate to have some great partners, while at the same time be in the ring with some very legendary guys and learn from. We could talk for a while on, just go down the list, starting with the Nature Boy Ric Flair to the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, as you mentioned, Ravishing Rick Rude, Lex Luger, Sting, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Cactus Jack, Black Jack Lanza, Wahoo McDaniel. There's such a laundry list of names, a long list of names of guys who had a name in wrestling that I was fortunate enough to either work with in partnership or work against, and all of those guys really contributed to my success.
Jim Crockett Wrestling and WCW Wrestling are very similar in a lot of ways, but how were they different to you?
Well, Jim Crockett Promotions was a mom and pop organization that Jim Sr. had started way back when. I think they first started in the promotion of boxing, eventually got into professional wrestling. At one point, they owned a minor league baseball team in Charlotte, I think affiliated with the Baltimore Orioles, if I remember right. And so they had always been around that world of promoting, and so it was great to work for a smaller organization like that. When Crockett eventually sold to Ted Turner and it became World Championship Wrestling, it shifted from a mom and pop to corporate America. And it just became a chapter in the portfolio of Ted Turner. So there wasn't as much, in my view, a hands-on, passionate, really love for the business as much as it was just a business deal for Turner. Now, don't get me wrong, Turner loved wrestling, but he wasn't going to be hands-on like Jim Crockett Jr. was. He hired guys to run the organization, ultimately run it into the ground as it sold and changed hands between Turner, Time Warner, AOL, and eventually, folded, and the rest was history.
So, were the Horsemen the greatest faction of all time?
I would arguably say that they certainly made their mark in wrestling, and I know when I became one of the superpowers with Dusty Rhodes, and he and I and the Road Warriors in any combination stepped into the ring with the Four Horsemen, we did sell out business. So they certainly made their mark in wrestling as far as a nucleus of guys who worked really, really well. Now, it's interesting. I was just looking at something today, and there's been a number of different groups of the Four Horsemen, but a lot of times we've heard it said, there's nothing like the original, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, really, I feel between Ole and Arn, Tully and Rick, that original group was one of the best of the best. Now, eventually Luger became a part of that, and he did add to the mix. But I still argue and say that original group was, if not the best, certainly one of the best that had been assembled. Speaking of the best, which one of your biographies is the best? I think you mentioned one earlier. Well, Nikita, A Tale of the Ring of Redemption will give people not only a glimpse into my life story, but William Murdoch, who wrote it with me, is a wrestling historian. And so anyone who loves wrestling will really, I think, be fascinated, because we took it back all the way back to the 1800s. So we give people an inside look at professional wrestling, kind of its roots and its beginnings, as well as the life of Nikita Koloff. So it's kind of a story within a story. So it goes all the way back past George Hackenschmidt? It goes past George Hackenschmidt. Wow, you know your history. Good for you. Well, thank you. I try to keep up on it. Yeah, I mean, gosh, there have been so many legends throughout the years, and to be just a part of that is got to be amazing. So yeah, it is. And George Hackenschmidt, it's funny. The majority of your listeners probably don't have a clue who that is, but again, guys like him who really kind of paved the way. Gorgeous George wasn't the first. There were guys that came before him, Lou Thez and others, who really paved the way for professional wrestling to be what it is today. Switching to a lighter note, is it true that your daughter won on America's Funniest Home Videos? Yeah, that is a little lighter note. She was determined. I have 4 girls, and she was maybe 7 or 8 at the time, and I was relatively fresh off of television, and they were doing a deal at the mall, and she was determined to imitate her daddy. And I'm like, honey, nobody's going to think that that's funny, but she, in her mind, she thought it was, and she was going to do it. And so she did it, and the producers and the whole crowd surrounding, when she said, I'm going to imitate my daddy, Nikita Koloff, the Russian Nightmare. And she did the most muscular and stuck her tongue out, and the crowd went crazy. They're like, is your dad here? And she goes, yeah, he's right there. And I'm like, oh, Lord. And so they pulled me onto the set. She did it. I did it. They flew the family out to L.A. and they chose second place, and then she had a shot at the 10 grand. I gave it to 2 comedians out of Las Vegas. I think that was rigged. Not that everything's a work. but anyway, she won $2,000, and kudos to her. That's awesome. After wrestling, obviously people's lives changed dramatically. I mean, you're still a part of it because you're still, you're now managing again. But after your in-ring competition, how did your life change? Well, it was something that was not necessarily, again, on the radar, just like wrestling wasn't on the radar when I broke into wrestling. It wasn't something I was necessarily looking for, nor would what happened about 11 months after leaving wrestling. Through business contacts, I'd met a Christian couple. I didn't grow up in church, but yet, I knew the stories. Like many, but just knowing the story didn't change my life. But I met this couple, and kind of the condensed version of that is, I called them up one day and said, hey, I'll be in church on Sunday, and they said, we'll meet you there, and that was a life-transforming day for me, really a divine encounter as I attended the service, and an invitation was given at the end. I went forward. There was just such a tugging of my heart, a really stirring in my spirit to go forward. And surrendered my life to Jesus, and that was 17 October 1993. And that decision that day, never in a million years would I have dreamed, fast forward all these years later, right, 27 years later, that I will now, with the platform of wrestling, having traveled to 30 different countries, preached in about 1,200 churches, plus or minus, 27 different denominations of churches, and just partnered with one of my best friends, Lex Luger. In fact, we just finished up a camp last week called Man Camp, where we just pour into the heart and soul of men, and the idea being to send them home, to be better husbands, better fathers, and just overall better out in the world. Never in a million years would I have dreamed I'd be doing what I'm doing now on what you might say a full-time basis. Although still involved in wrestling, as you mentioned, with the two guys sitting in the bullpen right now, waiting to talk about them. So.
Oh, definitely, and we're almost there. We're really close. I was going to say, you mentioned Luger. How is he doing nowadays?
He's doing great. I mean, if people don't know his story or some of his story, I would encourage them to pick up a copy of his book, Wrestling with the Devil. Go right on Amazon, right online, and find it. Follow him and I both on social media, on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram and have a Facebook presence. But he's in spite of a spinal cord injury that he suffered back in 2007, he's doing phenomenal. He'll be the first to tell you he's healthier now than he was back in those days when you saw him 270 pounds and chiseled. He takes much better care of himself, and believe it or not, in terms of eating and even exercising. And, the fact that the Lord brought the two of us back together in 2006 and actually even had him living with me for 10 months in 2015, which is where we birthed the Man Camp in a conference called Man Up. That's when that was birthed. It's just great to be back in partnership with him, tag teaming with him for a much you might say a much greater reward. Although we loved entertaining the fans and still love going out, signing autographs, and meeting the fans. Now to be able to minister to the fans as well as others around the world is a special reward.
That is phenomenal. I was going to say, yeah, I mean, as much as the sport's a great sport and, people enjoy it, it's really more important about changing lives and really just impacting people. Fortunately, I've about 2 years ago went through some changes and started going to church, and First Church, and it has made a huge impact in my life.
It does. I mean, it can be very life changing for a lot of people. And in fact, one of the fun, I know we're going to talk to these guys here in a second. In fact, Aleksandr was a part of that Man Camp last week, and he may share some of that story with you. But when you put yourself in a place like that, like a camp, or you make a decision to attend church on a regular basis, and you just open up your heart, and I mean, it's amazing at how. And not that life's just going to be a smooth sailing ship or a bed of roses. I'm not saying that, but to have someone who sticks closer than a brother by your side, who's not going to leave you nor ever forsake you, no matter what you're going through, what kind of adversity or what kind of challenge you're going through in your life, that's so reassuring to know you have that relationship. And so, yeah, very grateful and kudos to you for making that decision a couple years ago.
Thank you. Aleksandr, tell us a little bit about the camp. What was it like? What did you learn?
It was, even before Nikita had said it, I was going to tell you about it. It was amazing. I mean, I was around a group of really good men, and We spent a week together, bonded. There was a lot of activities that were centered around bringing us all together. It was great times worshiping, and it was great. The camp that it was at was in a place that you could really just feel how blessed it was as soon as you set foot on the grounds, and it was life changing for me. I would say any man that wants to get closer to God, be better for his family, and just be a better man in general should check it out. I didn't leave at the end of the week being the same person I was when I got there.
Wow. I mean, that is phenomenal. And is that something that people can only do in person? Can they learn about it online? How can they get involved with that, Nikita?
Well, there's a website, mancamp.info, mancamp.info. And it is a face-to-face. When Lex and I had the vision for this camp, we made a decision we're going to keep the numbers small and really kind of more intimate. I've got a staff that comes and volunteers their time. Every one of those men have been to a prior camp, and so now they're coming back saying, I want to volunteer. I want to pour into these other men that are coming that are going to receive perhaps something similar to what I received and be a part of that. And the last couple one that we did, we had men from 7 different states. I mean, we had men flying from Arizona and Texas and driving from Northern Virginia and Tennessee, North South Carolina and Georgia, and the one prior that we did just this past June, we had men from age 18 to age 73.
Dang.
So men, really men of all ages. The 73-year-old was a retired pastor who was just still hungry for more of God, and as Aleksandr was talking about, there's team building. There's a variety of different things we do, while we're all together. But some of these guys will make lifelong friendships by being a part of this camp. So yeah, if you're 18 years or older, man, go check it out. Mancamp.info. You'll find out more about it. If you have questions, you can shoot me a direct email right through the website.
Excellent. Neal, last time we talked, you'd mentioned Nikita was up for a movie role, but he didn't get it because he was too intimidating. What was that role?
Well, he was about to become the real Ivan Drago is what I like to refer to him as. He was very intimidating to Sly. But it was not only that. The one thing that was really awesome when you hear the story from Nikita himself is just the fact that it came down to 3 guys. It came down to himself, Dolph Lundgren, obviously, who got the part, and Kerry Von Erich, of all people. And when you look at everything, because recently Aleksandr and I, we were offered to read for a part in a television series called Heels. It's going on the Stars Network, and hopefully soon we'll be getting a call for that. And knocking on wood, but reading the lines, knowing your lines, and having to remember your lines both inside and out, it was something that when Aleksandr and I were reading for it, it took me back to Nikita's story about reading for the part of Ivan Drago. And so, we wanted to really nail this part, and I think we did. But the funny part in it was that Kerry Von Erich walks up to him and says, hey, do you know your lines? And Nikita's like, well, yeah, I mean, inside and out, we're one of the 3 that's going to get this part, man. And so, did you not read your lines? Well, no, I didn't really look at it. And he goes, well, that kind of narrows it down. It's a 50-50
Not only did he not read, he didn't even know there were lines. He goes, hey, are there some lines for this thing or something? Like, are you kidding me?
Oh, my gosh.
So, the good news was the odds just increased for me from 33% chance to 50-50 chance of getting the role. Because I knew Von Erich had just eliminated himself from the opportunity.
He took the tumble over the top rope and got knocked on the floor on that one. But the funny part about it was that Nikita stayed in character, on and off the set, to where people really believed that we've got a real life Russian coming in here and reading for this part. And the funny part was that, did the lines, they did a face-to-face, and then Sly loved it. And he looked at the director and he goes, "It was awesome until y'all got face-to-face and we lost you in a shadow." And I was like, you know what? What a way to go out. What a way to go out on that one. So massive that, they're like, "Hey, well, in this movie, we know you would kill him."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's supposed to be some reality to it. Yeah.
Well, that's what they explained. When they called me a couple weeks later, they go, Rocky Balboa is 35 years old in the movie, and even for Hollywood, it would be a stretch that this 35-year-old boxer could come back and beat a 285-pound, chiseled in stone, opponent. And I got it. I respected that, but yeah, I knew my opportunity wasn't when they said we lost you in his shadow. That wasn't good for Stallone, his ego, or my opportunity. Rocky Balboa was dwarfed by the Russian Nightmare.
Hey, yo, they can't see me. They can't see me.
So, Alexander, what movie role were you all up for, or is it still hush-hush, you can't talk about it?
It was, we weren't told not to talk about it. I will blow the opportunity by talking about it. It was like Jeff said, Neal said, it was a part for two characters that's a wrestling-based show that's going to be on Stars Network.
Oh, nice. I was going to say, when you mentioned something about heels for a second there, I was like, oh, good, you're going to be joining the AEW's women's wrestling movement, but obviously different type of heels.
We look terrible in dresses, so they turned us down on that.
Last time I looked.
So,
and you will not see the Russian Nightmare in pumps. So just for the rest.
Good. Yeah, that sounds like a scary thought. So, Nikita, why did you create the Koloff Dynasty?
It was over the period of years since retiring from wrestling. Again, I've stayed somewhat active in the sense of autograph signings, Comic-Cons and Legends wrestling events and those sorts of things. And actually, we've even done wrestling outreaches, believe it or not, where we've given fans actual wrestling matches, and then some of the different guys on the wrestling card who were Jesus followers would share their story or their testimony, how Jesus changed their life. And so we began to use wrestling as an outreach to draw in an audience that might not otherwise darken the door of a church. And we have actually seen, literally, I've witnessed thousands, from little kids to grandma and grandpa with tears running down their cheeks, standing around a wrestling ring that became an altar and giving their life to the Lord. And so I've remained in the world of wrestling. I'll always have an affinity for it. And so when Neal approached me, maybe a few years ago, not 2-3 years ago now, with the idea of extending the Koloff name, obviously Uncle Ivan had established the Koloff name many years ago, especially when he beat Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Garden and nearly created a riot, like for real. And then to bring me aboard as nephew Nikita, and again, to continue to extend that Koloff name. When Neal approached me with the idea, I was not opposed to it by any stretch of the imagination. I was actually intrigued by the idea. And so, we talked back and forth over the period of, maybe about a year. I guess I was kind of, he may or may not know this, probably does know, but, just kind of testing him to see how serious he was about it. So we would have some conversations about it, but the old expression that timing is everything. I was, in a sense, waiting for the right time, that if we were going to do it, when to launch it. And so in the process of our talks, Aleksandr comes into the picture, because in my mind, Ivan and I were a tag team. Now, yes, I did a lot of singles wrestling, and Neal and I even talked about potentially him being a singles wrestler. But I asked him, I go, hey, what's kind of lacking in the professional world today? And he goes, tag team wrestling. I go, well, there you go. Then that's it. Let's find you a partner and put the two of you together and create not just a legacy, but create a dynasty. And so Aleksandr comes into the picture. We begin to talk, and I was very familiar with Neal's back. I'd watched him wrestle over the last decade, perfect his craft. Saw some film of Aleksandr, liked what I saw there, liked his look, and then the two of them coming together. You know, we did some workouts in the gym and some workouts in the ring, and saw what they were capable of. Took them down to Atlanta for the Circle Square, the NWA Power, and they got an opportunity to debut some of their talent, and just feel like these guys have a real shot at, one, extending their career, and two, perhaps getting a run at that level.
So, Neal, what type of routine, what did he put you through? How intense was that training process?
Oh boy. So, a lot of repetitions, of just, for one, muscle memory, which was one of the big things that we needed for this. Is we needed to look the part, and not just with our faces, but with our bodies. I know Aleksandr and I, we both have been through tremendous workout regimens to where some of it is more toning, but at the same time, like we put on our size too, so where we could fit this role. Because I mean, when you look at it, Ivan was known back whenever he beat Bruno in the Garden in the 70s. I mean, he was a 300-pound man. Even though he was not a tall man, but he was 300 pounds and stout at that. And even going in through the later years, once Nikita was introduced, Nikita was chiseled from head to toe. Coming straight from football tryouts and just working out like a madman, and basically having a sleeping bag in the gym. That was what he was instilling in us, to where there's going to be some days where you don't feel like coming into the gym. There's going to be some days where you feel like not doing anything, but that's why you push through, and that's why you persevere through everything. And that's just some of the things that Nikita has brought to us, and even just the simple psychology of just tag team wrestling. Like, we would send Nikita a tag match that we would do, and it's like Aleksandr and I, we would think that the match was just golden, like, oh man, this match was amazing. Send it to Nikita, and next thing you know, it's like we get bullet points on this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong. And I'm a person that I want to know, okay, I'm fine with knowing what I did right, but tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what I did wrong, so where I can know how to improve it the next time, so where that doesn't happen again. Because we all make mistakes, but at the same time, even one of the best in the world, the best in the world in my opinion, Nikita, coaching us through that. Which is why when we first came out, he was Coach K. Now he's Uncle Nikita. But it was a very, very rigorous training routine.
I was going to say, that's one of the great things about professional wrestling. It seems to be a family, even if not related. It seems the connections are maybe even more intense because of the physical nature of the sport. What do you think about that, Aleksandr?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we've bonded fairly quick for three guys like Nikita touched on. He and Neal had known each other for a while, and then prior to becoming a team, Neal and I knew of each other and were friendly and everything, but weren't close like we are now. And so, yeah, becoming a team and now becoming like family, you're right. I mean, traveling together, the time we've spent together, the bonding through how Nikita has encouraged us and pushed us to become better. It's created a tight-knit bond between us.
I have to jump in here if you don't mind. A funny story, if I may, when I first approached Nikita about the idea. Nikita and I would talk often, and just, Nikita has been not just a great mentor, but an amazing friend, and not only that, but now an amazing uncle. A funny thing that happened was we were talking just on the phone. I was here in my home. My fiance was with me, and I'm just sitting there watching TV. And as Nikita and I are talking, and Donald Trump comes on the television, and they're talking about the Russian collusion and Russian this and Russian that. And Nikita had told me to hold on just 1 second. He was doing something, and then I'm just looking at Donald Trump and looking at the Russian collusion. I was like, man, that'd be an awesome gimmick. And I stopped, and I looked at the phone, and it says Nikita Koloff. And I looked back at the TV, and I looked, and he got back on the phone. I said, Nikita, I was like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to do this, but I got to let you go. It's about you, and I am got to think about some things, and I'll call you tomorrow. First thing, don't worry about it. And then that's when he goes, okay. And so I was like, it's nothing bad, don't worry. And I hung up. That's when I called him back the next day, presented the idea of extending the Koloff legacy, the Koloff Dynasty. And that was just a funny story. And it all led to Donald Trump doing that. The collusion. I'll tag a little something onto that as well. In that with the idea of this, for people to understand, it's a different era of wrestling than it was in those days. I came in, projected myself, portrayed myself as Ivan's nephew, learned a little bit of the English language, or of the Russian language, signed my name in Russian, and to convince people I was from Russia, which interestingly enough, people still, to this day, I still meet people who freak out when they don't hear the accent or figure out I'm really not from Russia. But with Neal and Aleksandr, we from the start decided to take a different approach. I mean, it's no secret that guys repackage themselves in professional wrestling. Hence, Crusher Khrushchev, Demolition, Axe or Smash, Repo Man, right? You go down to the Cactus Jack, Mankind, Mick Foley, Stunning Steve Austin, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mean Mark Callis, Undertaker. I mean, so you go kind of down the list of guys who've repackaged themselves. And so two things come to mind with Neal and Aleksandr is that they had very successful careers prior to this, but had an interest in taking their game to the next level, which every elite athlete has a coach. And so I'm not 100% of the time with them, but as they said, they would send me videos of their matches, and it wasn't so much me pointing out not necessarily what they did wrong, but what they could do to improve upon what they were already doing. And so to help take their game to the next level, and then as Koloff Dynasty, repackaging them as Koloff Dynasty with the opportunity, as we mentioned earlier in the show, to extend the Koloff name from not just a legacy, but to a dynasty. And these guys have the ability to carry it out. And so hopefully they're going to get, a break, whether it's with an AEW or an Impact or Ring of Honor or whoever, NWA, that they're going to get a shot at some world titles, some world belts somewhere along the line. It's not like they don't have any history with Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson and Cody Rhodes, etc. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes.
So, do you all have anything currently booked, Neal?
Yes, we have some stuff booked mainly for Lariato Pro and Wrestle America, both out of Georgia. Lariato Pro is looking to extend into South Carolina and to North Carolina, which is ran by Dot Gallows of Impact Wrestling, and they're on Impact Plus with their shows that they film each and every time whenever they have a show, whether it's out into a field or inside, COVID safe. But a very, very awesome promotion. Wrestle America has been very, very good to us. And I want to say it's, is it SOAR, Alexander? Is it SOAR Wrestling?
Yes, in Dallas.
In Dallas, Texas. There's that promotion. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that are on the books. And yeah, so everything's looking up. Everything is looking really amazing. And the future for the Koloff Dynasty is in place for sure.
Definitely. Like you mentioned, Lariato and Impact. I mean, recently had Josh Alexander on to talk about Impact's tag team division, which coincidentally, the same week I had him on, he ended up winning the tag team champions. Not that I take any credit for being good luck, but both him and Chris Bay have been on the show, and both have went on to win championships within the same week. So I'm just saying,
Hey, there could be a connection there somewhere. You never know. We'll have to see.
Exactly. So it sounds like you guys are open to new opportunities.
Yeah, I would say 100%. And again, we're just, I don't want to say we're being selective, but at the same time, we're not just going to throw ourselves out there. And I've told both, Alexander and Neal, as they continue, we're in a kind of a different season of time right now, and so it is a slightly different, but, I anticipate 2021, some things opening up and opportunities for these guys, and whether it's me standing in their corner or me coaching from a distance, as I said, these guys have what it takes, and I anticipate the wrestling world will be impacted by what these two guys do.
So we're going to do this in reverse alphabetical order. So we're going to have you go around and give out your social media, any of the other important final thoughts that you want to give, for our fans so they can follow you and learn more about the Koloff Dynasty. We'll start with Nikita.
I appreciate it. Thank you. People can find me on, of course, Twitter, Instagram. I'm posting a little positive note each and every day, just as a word of encouragement to people. That's part of what I do as well. I'm an encourager, at least I try to be. So Nikita Koloff with the number 1 behind it. They will find me there on Twitter and Instagram. There is a Facebook presence. If they're looking for me on Facebook, look for a photo of me standing in a river with 2 other guys, Ted DiBiase, Jason Sanderson, standing in the Jordan River when we were there in Israel, baptizing each other in the Jordan. That's the real me on Facebook. And then look me up on iTunes, Spotify, all the podcast platforms. Download It's Time to Man Up. We've had some great stories on there already. Lex Luger, Jackson Riker, who is one of the Forgotten Sons with SmackDown. His story, interviewed him. And actually my youngest daughter, Colby, from back when she was on reality TV back several years ago, interviewed her. And just phenomenal stories that you're going to hear from lots of people. So it's Time to Man Up, the podcast. If you're on the East Coast, you can actually catch it on Truth Radio Network. But those are my social media platforms.
Neal?
So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, which has changed recently, which is awesome, with which is Facebook.com/Neal Koloff, and on Instagram @Neal Koloff. On Twitter, it's @JeffLewisNeal. And every morning, you can find me on Hot 98.1 here in Greenville, South Carolina, which reaches into Charlotte and Atlanta. And we're syndicated in Knoxville, Tennessee. Those Facebook pages are Facebook.com/Hot 1045, and which is based in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Facebook.com/Hot 98.1.
And Alexander, tell them why we saved the best for last.
Mine's @Aleksandr Koloff on Twitter, @Aleksandr Koloff on Instagram, and Aleksandr Koloff on Facebook, spelled with a K and an S, not an X.
Excellent. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.